Professor Yoon's The Evolution Theory from the Viewpoint of Christianity, the thorough analysis of the descent or origin of man. Lecture 1. Introduction. I am the author of the thorough analysis of the origin of species and an emeritus professor of Cheongju University in Korea, Yoon Gil-jung. The title, The Descent or Origin of Man, for which the origin of man is short, gives us an impression that it will describe how life of man began in the beginning. But all books written by Charles Darwin contain no mention of the subject, the origin of life or organisms. From the start, he was not concerned with the origin of life. Whether this is true or not is ascertained simultaneously in the origin of species and the origin of man. I may here premise that I have nothing to do with the origin of the mental power any more than I have with that of life itself. We are concerned only with the diversities of instinct and of the other mental faculties in animals of the same class. The sole object of this work is to consider, firstly, whether man, like every other species, is descended from some pre-existing form. Secondly, the manner of his development, and thirdly, the value of the differences between the so-called races of man. When Charles Darwin's The Beagle first got to Fuego Island, those people were absolutely naked and bedaubed with paint. Their long hair was tangled, their mouths frothed with excitement, and their expression was wild, startled, and distrustful. They possessed hardly any arts and lived on what they could catch like wild animals. They had no government and were merciless to everyone not of their own small tribe. When the provisions had run out, they ate up their grandmother. He who witnessed these wretched spectacles relates his reminiscences as follows. The astonishment which I felt on first seeing a part of Euphrates on a wild and broken shore will never be forgotten by me. Further reflection at once rushed into my mind. Such were our ancestors. Charles Darwin supposed the two driving forces of evolution are natural selection and sexual selection. Natural selection is a phenomenon that unsuitable characters of organic beings are removed in the changing surroundings, and that necessary characters are newly formed in the process of their struggle for existence. Species which succeed in adapting to the conditions surrounding them can survive and thrive, but if met with failure, they become extinct. Sexual selection is a phenomenon that the secondary sexual characters change for the purpose of being fruitful. Species which succeed in this selection can reproduce their descendants continuously, but if met with failure in sexual selection, they become extinct on the earth. Therefore, organic beings, in order to prosper in nature, should be supported by the joint efforts of both natural selection and sexual selection. This is Charles Darwin's cherished opinion. In 1859, publication of The Origin of Species made the results of Charles Darwin's research work on natural selection come to light. But there were the contents which he wanted to have included in The Origin of Species, but he could not do so. Those were on the evolution of man. After a lapse of 12 years, he published Descent or Origin of Man, which included the facts that he did not mention about man in the former. All the time, he wanted to prove evolution from 2 points of view. The one is from the physical side, and the other from the mental side. The former contains homologous organs, rudimentary organs, reversion, etc., and the latter, the mental powers, the intellectual and the moral faculties, and the social instincts. The question that always haunted him was, are the causes of variation in man identical to those in other organisms? Or are the laws of variation in man identical to those in other organisms? And collocating all his scientific acquaintances and materials, he answered to his own questions. His firm belief was that the appearance and the intellectual powers of man were descended from some pre-existing lower form like other species. In other words, it was his conclusion that natural selection and sexual selection are causal elements of man's development. If The Origin of Species is a collection of treatises on the variation of all organisms, The Origin of Man is an itemized discussion only on man. It applies a general idea of natural and sexual selection to man. Because The Origin of Man includes contents that he wanted to treat with but could not in The Origin of Species, it may safely be said that Charles Darwin's long-cherished view takes a concrete form through The Origin of Man. Of all the faculties of human mind, it will be admitted that reason stands at the summit. They say that only a man of rational faculty can progress, only a man of rational faculty can speak articulate language, and only a man of rational faculty can believe in God. But many kinds of animals show sociability and serve for each other. Associated animals living in a group have a feeling of love to each other, and certainly sympathize with others' distress or danger, which are not felt by non-social adult animals. Besides love and sympathy, animals exhibit other qualities connected with the social instincts, which would be called moral with man. The sense and intuitions, the various emotions and faculties, imitation, reason, etc., of which man boasts, may be found in an incipient or even sometimes in a well-developed condition. In the lower animals and they are capable of some inherited improvement. The difference in mind between man and the higher animals, great as it is, certainly is the problem of degree, but not of kind. Our moral sense and conscience is the most important thing of the differences between man and the lower animals. It does not mean that they can acquire moral sense like man when the intellectual faculties of beasts are activated and developed to a high degree. As if animals have the sense of beauty, they may have the sense of the right and the wrong. The moral rule of man, who are social animals, is based on the social instincts and is matured by experience, repetition, and practice. Considering the fact that the tendency to keep faith with their comrades and to obey their boss is common to social animals all, it is probable that the gradual evolution and the completion of the intellectual and moral faculties were made by the way of natural selection, in case they were important to man. We can say that it is owing to these that man could hold the most dominant position in nature. We daily see these mental and moral faculties developing in every infant, and we may trace a perfect gradation from the mind of an utter idiot, lower than that of an animal, low in the scale, to the mind of a Newton. Therefore, we cannot deny that evolution of mind is possible. The lower animal must have their bodily structure modified in order to survive under greatly changed conditions. But man has great power of reason to adapt his habitats to the new conditions of life. Ultimately, our moral sense or conscience becomes a highly complex sentiment originating in the social instincts, largely guided by the approbation of our fellow men, ruled by reason, and in later times by deep religious feelings, and confirmed by introduction and habit. If a law comes into existence and holds good, everything is explained by it, and it is possible to predict everything to come with it. Being fruitful and increasing in number are the value of the creation and the rule of nature. We can confirm them with Charles Darwin's law of evolution. The real discussion is commenced in the next. Shalom.